I stand in the great hall of the Metropolitan Museum, the air thick with the scent of expensive lilies and even more expensive lies. Julian Sterling, my husband and the man New York calls a saint, leans in to kiss my cheek while whispering that I look beautiful. A high, piercing hum shatters my right eardrum, a physical pain that screams he is lying through his teeth. I smile for the cameras, my silk gown shimmering under the chandeliers, but my heart is a block of ice. I need 7 more days. Just 168 hours until our 5th anniversary, when the $10 billion inheritance finally becomes mine. If I leave now, I lose the Vance Tech empire. But if I stay, I can trigger the moral clause and leave Julian with absolutely nothing. He raises a crystal glass, his voice rich and steady, announcing a $50 million donation to a charity in my name. The ringing in my ear turns into a violent roar, because I know he does not have 50 cents, let alone 50 million. Chloe Montgomery, Julian's supposed consultant, glides toward us with a look of predatory triumph in her eyes. Julian introduces her as a distant cousin from London, here to assist with the upcoming merger that will swallow my father's legacy. My ear rumbles with the sound of a lie so massive it feels like a physical blow to my skull. I can hear Julian's heart thumping with a frantic, guilty rhythm as his hand slides down to the small of my back, right where Chloe can see it. Chloe trips, a calculated, graceful move, and splashes a full glass of red wine across my white silk dress. The liquid is cold, staining the fabric like a fresh wound, while the elite crowd gasps and then begins to tatter. She pretends to be horrified, dabbing at my chest with a handkerchief that smells of Julian's cologne, whispering that I am just a common piece of trash. Julian does not defend me. He simply sighs, telling the guests that his wife has always been clumsy and unstable. I stand perfectly still, the wine dripping onto the marble floor, feeling the eyes of New York's elite burning into my skin. Julian calls me a gold digger who cannot handle a single night in high society, his voice filled with a practiced, condescending pity. I do not scream. I do not cry. I simply watch the way his eyes linger on Chloe's throat, recording the betrayal in my mind. He wants me to snap, to throw a tantrum so he can use the rehab trap to commit me to a psychiatric ward before the inheritance settles. If I am declared mentally unfit, Julian becomes the sole trustee of $10 billion, and I become a ghost in a locked room. I reach down and pick up a diamond earring from the floor, right where Julian and Chloe were standing moments ago. It is a blue sapphire, the same one I saw in a boutique on 5th Avenue last week. The one Julian said was too gaudy for my taste. Julian's grip on my shoulder tightens, his fingers digging into my bone with enough force to leave a bruise that will last for days. He tells me to go home, to take my pills and stop embarrassing him, his breath smelling of aged scotch and deception. I look him in the eye, show him the earring, and ask him if he bought this for the cousin he barely knows. He tells me it is a gift for my birthday, a surprise he was saving, but the ringing in my ear is so loud I can barely hear his voice. His heart skips a beat, a clear sign of a panic response, but he maintains the mask of a loving husband for the onlookers. I tell him the dress costs $200,000 and I expect the check on my desk by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. His face turns a dark shade of red, a vein pulsing in his forehead, but he cannot strike me in a room full of billionaires. A text message vibrates in Julian's pocket, and his expression shifts from anger to a sudden, bone-deep fear. He releases my shoulder, ignoring me entirely, and pulls Chloe toward the balcony while frantically typing on his phone. I am left standing alone in the center of the hall, a stained woman in a room full of sharks, but I feel more powerful than ever. I turn around and see a man standing by the Egyptian exhibit, his eyes sharp and his suit worth more than Julian's entire car collection. He is Marcus Thorne, the man who knows Julian's debt to the Russian mob is about to come due. He holds a black leather folder, nods at me once, and moves through the crowd like a shadow toward the exit. I follow him, the earring squeezed in my palm until it draws blood, knowing that the game of lies has finally found its master. I walk out of the museum, the wine stain on my chest feeling like a brand of shame, and find Marcus Thorne waiting by a black town car. Marcus tells me Julian has already moved the pieces on the board, hiring a disgraced psychiatrist named Dr. Aris to meet me at the house tonight. The high hum in my ear is absent, meaning Marcus Thorne is telling the absolute truth. He hands me a micro recorder, no larger than a penny, and tells me to hide it inside my wedding ring. Julian is desperate for the $10 billion inheritance, and he will use the next 6 days to turn me into a ghost. I step into the car, the leather smelling of old money and an impending war, while Marcus disappears into the shadows of Fifth Avenue. My fingers brush the hidden device, a small piece of technology that will soon record the death of Julian's reputation. We drive through the neon blur of Manhattan, toward the Sterling mansion, where a different kind of predator is waiting for my arrival. The front door of the mansion swings open, and Julian stands in the foyer with a look of manufactured concern on his face. He is not alone, as a man in a gray suit sits on the velvet sofa, holding a leather clipboard and a silver pen. Julian tells me he is worried about my recent outbursts, and that this doctor is only here to help me find peace. My ear rumbles with a low, vibrating hum, signaling a calculated lie that makes my skin crawl. Julian introduces the man as Dr. Aris, a specialist in nervous breakdowns, but I know him as the man Julian paid $50,000 to sign my committal papers. I walk past them, the wine stain on my dress, a silent witness to the humiliation Julian orchestrated only 1 hour ago. Dr. Aris watches me with clinical eyes, his heart rate steady, as if he has done this to a dozen wives before me. Julian reaches for my hand, but I flinch, playing the role of the unstable woman he desperately needs me to be. Dr. Aris asks me to sit down, his voice smooth like oil on a blade, and begins to question my memory of the Gala events. Julian interrupts, claiming I have been talking to walls and seeing people who do not exist in our home. The buzzing in my ear is now a constant, deafening scream, because every word out of Julian's mouth is a fabricated poison. I look at the doctor, my eyes wide and my hands trembling slightly, while I activate the recorder inside my ring. I tell them I hear voices, but the voices are only telling me how much Julian loves me and our beautiful life together. Julian's heart skips a beat, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, because he did not expect me to agree with his delusions so easily. He tells the doctor that I have been hallucinating about his affair with Chloe, his cousin, and that it is breaking his heart. The lie is so sharp it feels like a physical needle pricking my eardrum, but I only smile and nod like a broken doll. Julian brings out a bottle of pills, white tablets that he claims the doctor prescribed to help me sleep through the night. He tells me to take 2, his voice dripping with a fake tenderness that hides the predatory hunger in his eyes. My ear vibrates with the sound of his deception, because I know these are not sedatives, but high-dose antipsychotics meant to dull my senses. I take the pills from his hand, my fingers brushing his skin, and I pretend to swallow them while hiding the tablets under my tongue. I tell Julian that he is the only one I can trust, and that Chloe is indeed a wonderful cousin who cares for our family. Julian looks at Dr. Aris, a smirk of victory tugging at the corner of his lips, believing he has finally broken my spirit. He tells the doctor that my condition is worsening rapidly, and that I may need to be moved to a private facility for my own safety. The doctor nods, scribbling on his clipboard, while I record every second of this criminal conspiracy for the world to hear. I stand up and stumble, pretending the medication is already taking effect, and Julian catches me with a grip that is far too tight for a loving husband. He whispers into my ear that I should have signed the papers when I had the chance, his voice cold and devoid of any human emotion. The hum in my ear is silent now, because Julian is finally being honest about his hatred for me and my father's legacy. He tells Dr. Eris that the car is ready, and that they should move me to the Sterling Clinic before the morning news cycle begins. I look at the grandfather clock in the hall, counting the seconds until my lawyer triggers the first phase of our counterattack. Julian tells the doctor that I have no living relatives to object, and that he has full power of attorney over my person and my assets. The lie returns. A low buzz. Because Julian knows Marcus Thorne is still alive and holding the original copy of my father's final will. The front gate alarm sounds, a sharp intrusion that breaks the silence of the mansion and causes Julian's heart rate to spike in fear. A group of men in dark suits enter the foyer, led by Marcus Thorne, who holds a court order signed by a federal judge only 30 minutes ago. Marcus tells Julian that Dr. Eris is under investigation for medical fraud, and that any evaluation performed tonight is legally void and inadmissible. Julian's face turns ashen, his mask of the concerned husband crumbling into a heap of desperate possible, ugly rage. He tells the officers that I am a danger to myself, but I stand up straight, my voice clear and my mind sharper than a razor. I pull the white pills from my mouth and drop them into a glass of water, watching them dissolve into a cloudy, bitter mess of evidence. I tell Julian that the next 5 days will be the longest of his life, because I have recorded every lie he told to the man he thought was a doctor. Julian reaches for the recorder, but Marcus Thorne steps between us, his presence a wall of legal steel that Julian cannot breach. Julian stands there, his eyes bloodshot and his face twisted into a sick smirk that makes my skin crawl. He leans in close, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and the rot of a dying soul, and whispers that my father was not the hero the city believes him to be. He says Thomas Vance was a criminal who laundered money for the Russian mob, and that he has the documents to prove it in the morning papers. The hum in my ear is deafening, a jagged, electric vibration that tells me he is weaving a lie out of half-truths to save his own skin. He demands the digital files from the Gala in exchange for his silence on the scandal that would bury the Vance name in the dirt of Manhattan. I look at Marcus Thorne, whose jaw is set tight, while the police officers wait for my lead to press charges for medical fraud. I realize Julian is not just fighting for the $10 billion inheritance. He is fighting for his life against the shadow of my father. I pretend to tremble, my hand going to my throat, letting him think his threat has finally cracked my resolve and my spirit. I tell Marcus to step back, that I cannot let my father's memory be dragged through the mud of a tabloid scandal for the sake of a recording. Julian's heart rate slows down, a rhythmic proof of smug satisfaction that pulses in the silent foyer of our home. Julian tells the officers there was a misunderstanding, that his wife is just prone to dramatic episodes due to her grieving process and the stress of the merger. The humming in my ear returns, a low and steady buzz of a man who believes he has regained control of the game and my future. I hand him a decoy flash drive from my pocket, telling him it contains every second of the recording from tonight and the previous week. He takes it with a predatory grin, his fingers brushing mine as if he has already won the $10 billion and the Vance tech empire. Chloe Montgomery descends the stairs, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of hatred and relief as she watches me surrender to her lover. Julian tells me to go to my room and stay there, his voice filled with the cold authority of a master who has broken his favorite pet. I nod, keeping my head down like a defeated woman. while my mind is already calculating the bypass code for the biometric safe in his study. The air in the mansion feels heavy, a toxic blend of victory and hidden daggers that only I can sense with my gift. I walk past Chloe, who sneers and calls me a piece of useless trash. But I do not react because I am already focused on the midnight hour. It is 3 o'clock in the morning, the darkest hour of New York, and the Sterling mansion is a tomb of expensive secrets and rotting promises. I slip out of bed, moving like a ghost through the hallway, my bare feet silent on the cold marble floor that Julian bought with my money. I reach the door of Julian's private study, the heavy oak paneling, smelling of mahogany and the sweat of a desperate man who is running out of time. I pull out a small electronic bypass tool, a gift from my father's head of security, and connect it to the biometric keypad. The light on the scanner blinks from red to amber, a silent countdown that feels like a hammer striking my chest in the darkness. I hear the distant sound of Julian snoring from the guest suite, where he is sleeping with Chloe, a rhythmic proof of his unearned confidence. The safe clicks, a dull sound that echoes in the quiet room, and the heavy steel door swings open to reveal the darkness inside. I do not look for money or gold. I look for the black folder labeled Project Phoenix, the one Julian mentioned in his drunken boasts. My fingers find the leather folder, the texture cold and rough against my skin, and I pull it into the pale moonlight. I open the first page and see a series of bank transfers, hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from Sterling Global to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The dates align perfectly with the month of my father's fatal car accident on the George Washington Bridge, 5 years ago. I read the name of the recipient, a man known in the underworld as the Cleaner, and my blood turns to liquid nitrogen in my veins. The hum in my ear is silent, because the ink on this paper is an undeniable, frozen truth that Julian Sterling cannot explain away with a smile. He did not just marry me for the money. He killed the only person who could have seen through his pathetic facade and stopped his rise to power. I see a photograph tucked into the back of the file, showing my father's brake lines being severed by a man in a Sterling Global uniform. The betrayal is no longer a vibration in my ear. It is a physical weight that threatens to crush my very soul into the floor. I hear a floorboard creak behind me, a sound so sharp it makes my heart stop, and I realize I am no longer alone in this room. Julian stands in the doorway, the light from the hallway casting his shadow across the desk like a giant, dark bird of prey waiting for its meal. He says he knew I would come here, that my curiosity has always been my greatest weakness and my inevitable downfall in this house. He tells me the folder I am holding is my death warrant, and that no court in the country will ever see those papers or the truth. The hum in my ear is gone, replaced by the chilling clarity of a man who is ready to kill to protect his stolen empire. He steps into the room, a silver letter opener in his hand, his eyes void of the charm he uses to seduce the world every day. He tells me my father was a fool who thought he could change the rules of the city, and that I am even more of a fool for trying. I feel the cold air from the open safe on my back, a reminder of the secrets that are now my only weapon against a murderer. I reach behind me, my fingers closing around the heavy crystal decanter on the desk. While I stare into the eyes of my father's killer, I tell Julian that Marcus Thorne has a digital copy of every page in this folder, and that a timer is set to release it to the press in 1 hour. The hum in my ear explodes into a frantic, chaotic ringing as Julian tells me I am lying to save my own pathetic life from him. His heart is racing now, a drum of panic that tells me he is terrified of the ghost of the man he murdered on that bridge. He lunges forward, his hand reaching for my throat with a speed I did not expect from a man of his stature and age. I dodge the strike and swing the crystal decanter with every ounce of my rage and the strength of the Vance name. The glass shatters against his temple, a spray of amber liquid and red blood blooming in the moonlight like a dark, twisted flower of justice. Julian falls back, his head hitting the sharp edge of the safe, his body sliding down to the floor in a heap of broken arrogance. I grab the folder and the micro-recorder from the desk, stepping over his unconscious body as the sound of sirens begins to wail. Chloe stands in the doorway, her silk nightgown a pale ghost against the dark oak of the study. She does not look at Julian bleeding on the floor. She looks at the black folder in my hand with a cold, hungry greed. She opens her mouth and a high, piercing scream fills the room, but her eyes remain dry and calculated like a seasoned predator. She pulls out her phone and tells the emergency operator that I have murdered Julian in a fit of jealous rage. The high, vibrating hum in my ear is a jagged blade of a lie, because she knows Julian is still breathing, and she knows exactly why I struck him. She tells the police that I am armed and dangerous, a crazy woman who has finally snapped under the weight of her own delusions. I shove the Project Phoenix folder into my coat and move toward her, my face a mask of cold, focused fury that makes her step back. She trips over a chair on purpose, clawing at her own neck to create fake bruises that will tell a story of a struggle I never started. I hear the first siren wailing at the end of the driveway, a sound of impending doom. The red and blue lights begin to dance on the library walls, turning the room into a strobe light of a crime scene. Chloe screams again, her voice louder now, begging for help from the officers she knows are already at the front gate. The hum in my ear is a constant, deafening roar as she tells the air that I tried to kill her too for the sterling fortune. Julian stirs on the floor, a low groan of a dying animal, but Chloe ignores him to maintain the performance of a terrified victim. I do not have time to explain the truth to men with guns who have been paid by Julian for 5 years. I turn and run through the secret library door, a passage Julian forgot during his years of arrogant control over this house. My feet are silent on the narrow wooden steps, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts of cold air and adrenaline. I hear the front door crash open, a heavy thud of boots on marble, and a voice shouting for the suspect to stay where she is. I am a fugitive in the house my father built, hunted by the men Julian owns like cattle. I reach the basement level, the air smelling of damp stone, and the exhaust from the 10-car garage above my head. I find the old utility tunnel that leads to the service road behind the estate, a path only the ghosts of the Vance family remember. The fire alarm on the wall catches my eye, a red box that holds the power to create a perfect Esringen, chaotic distraction for the police. I smash the glass with the heavy crystal decanter I still hold in my hand, and a piercing, metallic shriek fills the entire mansion. The sprinklers in the hall trigger, a cold rain of water that will wash away fingerprints but buy me 30 seconds of pure confusion. I hear the officers shouting over the noise, their focus shifting from a manhunt to a potential fire in a billion-dollar estate. I slip into the dark tunnel, the folder pressed tight against my ribs like a shield against the darkness of the world. I am leaving my life behind, but I am carrying the weapon that will destroy the Sterling name forever. I reach the end of the pipe and crawl out into the wet grass of the outer woods. A black town car idles at the edge of the woods, its headlights off like a predator waiting in the deep New York night. Marcus Thorne steps out, his face a map of worry and the grim determination of a man who has lost everything but his honor. He tells me the news has already hit the midnight cycle, and every screen in Times Square is showing my wedding photo with the word murderer. The high hum in my ear is absent, meaning the world truly believes the lie Chloe Montgomery has whispered into the ears of the police. Marcus tells me Julian is being rushed to the hospital, and he is already being called a hero who survived a brutal attack. I am now the most hated woman in the state, a fugitive heiress with 4 days left to reclaim her father's legacy and her own soul. We drive away from the sirens, moving through the back streets of Westchester toward a safe house in the industrial heart of Brooklyn. The city lights blur into a streak of gold and red, a neon prison for a woman who has nothing left but a folder of blood. We enter a warehouse on the waterfront, the smell of grease and salt water a sharp contrast to the luxury of the Sterling mansion. Marcus opens his laptop and shows me the warrant for my arrest. A legal chain that Julian has wrapped around my neck from his hospital bed. He tells me Julian's lawyers are already filing for an emergency guardianship to take control of Vance Tech before the Friday deadline. The hum in my ear is a low, persistent buzz because Marcus is worried that we cannot win this war against the Sterling media machine. Julian has the police, the press, and the public sympathy, while I have a folder and a voice that the world has already silenced. I look at the photograph of the man cutting my father's brake lines. The face of a man Julian paid $500,000 to kill. This is not just about a $10 billion inheritance anymore. It is about the cold, hard justice that only the dead can truly demand. I tell Marcus to get me a burner phone and a floor plan of the Sterling Global headquarters in Manhattan. We have 96 hours to prove that the hero of New York is a common murderer. Marcus tells me Chloe is already at the hospital, giving an emotional interview about my long history of mental instability and drug abuse. The hum in my ear returns. A screeching, distant noise from the screen that confirms every word Chloe Montgomery speaks is a calculated poison. She tells the world I was obsessed with the Vance fortune and that I killed my father to get to the money faster than Julian. This is Julian's masterstroke, turning my own father's death into a weapon to destroy my credibility and my future in this city. I realize the police are not just looking for a suspect. They are looking for a woman they have been told is a violent, psychotic killer. I am alone in a warehouse with a man I barely know, hunted by the very people I was born to lead and protect. I look at my reflection in a cracked mirror on the wall, the wine stain on my chest, looking like a dark, expanding heart of a shadow. I am Elena Vance, the woman who hears the truth in a world built on lies, and I am finally ready to burn it all down. I will not hide in the dark like a victim. I will walk into the light as the reaper Julian Sterling never saw coming. I stand in the shadow of the Sterling Global Tower, wearing a heavy blue janitor uniform and a cap pulled low over my eyes. Every digital billboard in Times Square shows my face. A grainy security image from the museum labeled as a dangerous psychopath. The high, constant hum in my ears is a vibration of millions of people believing a lie that Julian and Chloe crafted in the dark. I push a heavy cleaning cart toward the service entrance, the wheels squeaking against the wet pavement of Manhattan. The security guard at the gate looks at my badge, a fake created by Marcus Thorne that costs $10,000 in Bitcoin. My heart rate is steady, a cold rhythm of a woman who has already died once and has nothing left to lose to the Sterling name. The guard nods and swipes the card, the green light blinking like a go-ahead from the devil himself into the glass fortress. I enter the freight elevator, the smell of industrial soap and grease replacing the expensive perfume of my former life. I am a ghost in the machine of my father's empire, moving through the steel veins of a building that was built on his blood and sweat. The elevator stops at the 40th floor, the executive suite, where Julian keeps his secrets and his stolen promises in a steel safe. I step out into the hallway, the silence of the building at 4 a.m, feeling like a physical weight on my shoulders. I hear the distant hum of the air conditioning, a rhythmic sound that hides the vibration of my own pulse in my throat. I reach the door of Julian's office, the biometric scanner glowing red like a predatory eye watching for my every mistake. I pull out a small device Marcus gave me, a contact lens case containing a synthetic print of Julian's thumb I lifted from the decanter. The scanner turns green, a soft click echoing in the empty hall as the heavy glass door slides open without a sound. I enter the room, the smell of Julian's expensive cologne lingering in the air like a poisonous fog that threatens to choke my resolve. I move toward the desk, my fingers trembling slightly as I look for the second folder, the one Julian used to blackmail my father's ghost. A door at the back of the office opens, and I duck behind the heavy mahogany desk, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts of cold adrenaline. I hear the click of high heels on the hardwood floor. A sharp, rhythmic sound that belongs only to Chloe Montgomery. She is not alone, as the deep rumble of a man's voice follows her into the room. A voice that does not belong to Julian Sterling. The high hum in my ear is silent, meaning Chloe believes she is in a place where she no longer needs to lie to the world. I hear her laugh, a cold and metallic sound that makes the hair on my neck stand up in the freezing office air. She tells the man that Julian is a useful idiot, a pawn who thinks he is the king of New York while she holds the strings to his debt. She mentions the $60 million in margin calls from the Russian mob, and how Julian is about to be liquidated along with the Vance estate. The realization hits me like a physical blow to the stomach. A truth so dark it makes the Project Phoenix folder feel light in my hand. Chloe is not the mistress. She is the architect of Julian's destruction and the true owner of the Sterling Global debt. The man asks her about the Friday deadline, the day I am supposed to inherit the $10 billion in the Vance tech empire. Chloe tells him that Elena Vance will be in a psychiatric prison or a morgue by then, and Julian will be the sole trustee for exactly 1 hour. She says Julian will sign the transfer of assets to her shell company in the Cayman Islands, and then he will have a fatal accident in his hospital bed. The hum in my ear remains silent, a terrifying proof that Chloe is planning a double murder to consolidate her power over my family's legacy. She calls Julian a liability, a weak man who couldn't even kill a father and daughter without leaving a trail of blood and black folders. My ear vibrates with a sudden, sharp ringing as she tells the man that she was the one who sent the text message to Julian at the gala. It was a warning, a threat she used to push Julian into a corner so he would strike me and activate the rehab trap. Every move Julian made was a reaction to Chloe's invisible hand, a puppet dance choreographed by a woman who has no soul and no mercy. I reach for my phone to record the conversation, but my fingers brush a glass paperweight on the edge of the desk, and it rolls toward the floor. I catch it just before it hits the wood, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird in a cage of bone and fear. I hear Chloe stop talking, the silence in the room so absolute that I can hear the ticking of the clock on the far wall. She asks the man if he heard a sound, and I see her shadow move toward the desk, a long and dark shape that stretches across the floor. I press my body against the cold wood, my eyes closed, praying to the ghost of my father to keep me hidden in this den of vipers. Chloe reaches the desk, her perfume filling my lungs, a scent of jasmine and the metallic tang of unspent blood. She pauses. Her hand inches from the spot where I am hiding, while her heart rate remains steady and cold like a stone in the ocean. The man calls her name, telling her they have to leave before the security sweep begins on the executive level in 5 minutes. Chloe hesitates, then turns away, her heels clicking toward the door as she tells him that the hunt for Elena Vance will end tonight at the safe house. I wait until the door clicks shut and the sound of the elevator echoes through the hallway before I dare to breathe again in the darkness. I stand up, my legs shaking, and I realize Chloe mentioned the safe house, which means Marcus Thorne might be compromised or under surveillance. I look at the computer screen on Julian's desk, which is still active, showing a real-time GPS tracker on a black town car in Brooklyn. The realization turns my blood to ice, because the tracker is located exactly where I left Marcus Thorne only 2 hours ago in the warehouse. Chloe did not just set a trap for me. She is about to liquidate the only ally I have left in this city of lies and glass. I grab a hard drive from the server rack, my mind racing through the logistics of a rescue mission I am not prepared to lead or execute. I hear a beep from the hallway, a sound of a security badge being swiped, and I realize the sweep has started earlier than Chloe predicted. I run toward the window, the city of New York spread out below me like a grid of gold and red fire. I am 40 floors above the ground, trapped in a glass fortress, with a murderer on her way to kill my only friend. I am hanging 40 floors above Manhattan, clinging to a steel rig while police smash the glass above me. Chloe Montgomery framed me for murder, stole my husband, and is now hunting my only ally in Brooklyn. I have 48 hours to prove Julian killed my father or lose everything. The security boots thud against the office floor behind the shattered window, the sound muffled by the screaming wind of the New York night. I grab a heavy fire axe from the wall and shatter the reinforced glass, letting the shards rain down like diamonds into the dark abyss of the city. I step onto the exterior cleaning platform, my fingers numb as I grasp the cold steel cables that are my only lifeline. I hit the manual release lever, and the rig drops like a stone, the sudden gravity clawing at my stomach as the glass tower blurs past my eyes. 40 floors of sterling global history disappear in a flash of gold and shadow, the ground rushing up to meet me with a terrifying speed. I slam the emergency brake at the 3rd floor, the metal groaning and sparks flying, before I roll onto a concrete balcony. A delivery motorcycle idles at the corner of the service road, its engine a low growl in the empty, rain-slicked street. I shove the rider off, kick the gear into place, and roar toward the Brooklyn Bridge with the Project Phoenix folder tucked against my ribs. My heart is a drum against my ribs as I weave through the yellow cabs, the motorcycle leaning so low I can feel the heat of the asphalt. Every siren in the city feels like it is screaming for my head, a choir of law enforcement orchestrated by Chloe Montgomery's lies. I check the GPS tracker on the hard drive, seeing the red dot of Marcus Thorne's location pulsing like a dying star in a waterfront warehouse. Chloe is moving faster than I predicted, her professional killers already encircling the steel tomb where my only friend is hiding. I push the bike to 100 miles per hour, the wind cutting through my janitor uniform and stinging my eyes as I cross the dark river. Marcus has no idea he is a dead man walking, a liability that Chloe plans to liquidate before the morning sun hits the skyline. I reach the industrial zone, the smell of salt and rust filling my lungs as I kill the engine and glide into the shadows. 2 black SUVs are parked outside the main gate, their engines idling like hungry beasts, waiting for a signal to strike. I slip through a broken window at the back of the warehouse, the glass crunching softly under my boots as I move through the darkness. Inside, the air is cold and smells of grease, the space illuminated by flickering overhead lights that cast long, dancing shadows on the floor. Marcus is tied to a steel chair in the center of the room, his face bruised and his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Chloe Montgomery stands over him, holding a silver pistol to his temple with a smile that belongs on a demon. The high hum in my ear is silent, meaning she is ready to pull the trigger and she truly believes Elena Vance is miles away. She tells Marcus that I am a ghost, and that ghosts do not have the power to save anyone from the reality of a bullet. I step into the light, my hands empty, but my mind armed with $60 million of truth that will burn this room down. The hitmen turn their weapons toward my chest, their eyes cold and hollow. The men of the Russian mob who only answer to money. I tell the lead gunman, a man with a jagged scar across his throat, to check his offshore account before he obeys a woman who is stealing from him. Chloe's heart skips a beat, a frantic, irregular rhythm that echoes in the silent warehouse and confirms my suspicions about her financial treason. I throw the Sterling Global hard drive at the gunman's feet, telling him the transaction logs show $10 million missing from the last debt payment. I explain that Julian Sterling is a broke puppet, and Chloe is the one skimming the cream off the top of their blood money. The atmosphere shifts instantly, the air turning heavy with the threat of a different kind of violence as the hitmen look at each other. Chloe screams that I am a liar, that the news says I am a psychotic killer who murdered my own father in cold blood. The ringing in my ear is a violent, screeching noise. The sound of a predator realizes she has just become the prey in her own trap. The lead hitman, Even, lowers his submachine gun from my chest and points the cold barrel directly at Chloe Montgomery's throat. He asks her where the missing $10 million went. His voice a low rumble that sounds like the grinding of tectonic plates. Chloe stammers, her face turning a sickly shade of gray under the harsh warehouse lights. Her power evaporating in the face of mob logic. The hum in my ear is gone, replaced by the chilling silence of her absolute friend. Naked fear as she realizes her charms mean nothing to a $60th million debt. She tries to run toward the exit, but the men in the overcoats block her path, their bodies a wall of meat and steel that she cannot breach. I walk over to Marcus and cut his zip ties with a pocket knife I found on a crate. My hands steady and my eyes fixed on my enemy. He looks at me with wide eyes, his breathing finally slowing as the realization of his survival begins to sink into his bruised mind. I tell him we are not safe yet, but the predators are finally busy eating each other in the dark. Chloe is screaming for Julian to help her. But Julian is a vegetable in a hospital bed, a man she was planning to kill once the papers were signed. Ivan tells his men to put Chloe in the SUV and take her to the docks for a long, painful conversation about the missing Vance inheritance. They drag her away, her heels scraping against the concrete until the heavy steel doors slam shut and the warehouse falls into a terrifying silence. I stand in the center of the room, the Project Phoenix folder still gripped tight in my hand, the weight of my father's ghost heavy on my soul. Marcus tells me we have less than 48 hours until the Friday deadline, the moment I either reclaim my empire or lose it Vancouver. We have the proof of the murder, the proof of the fraud, and the proof of the theft, all recorded on the devices Julian thought were toys. The high hum in my ear is absent as Marcus tells me that we are finally going to win this war for the Vance name. I look at the dark water of the East River, knowing the final battle starts at the hospital where Julian Sterling is pretending to be a hero. I tell Marcus to get the car ready, because the Saint of New York needs to wake up to a nightmare he cannot lie his way out of. I walk through the sterile, white halls of Lenox Hill, the nurse scrubs feeling like the shroud of a ghost, the scent of antiseptic and cold. Clinical death hangs heavy in the air of the private intensive care unit. 2 officers stand outside room 402, their faces bored, as they scroll through their phones in the dim light. I adjust my surgical mask, my heart rate steady, like the ticking of a countdown clock in a silent room. I carry a tray of medications, the steel clinking softly, as I nod to the guards with professional indifference. My fake badge swipes, the green light blinking, like a go-ahead from the Reaper herself into the lion's den. I enter the room, the rhythm of the heart monitor, filling the silence with a steady, artificial pulse of life. Julian Sterling lies on the bed, his head bandaged, and his eyes closed in a perfect Indives, manufactured coma. I lock the door behind me, the sound a final click, of a cage closing on a cornered animal. My ear begins to rumble with a low, constant vibration. Because Julian's body is telling a truth, his face is hiding. The monitor shows a steady 70 beats per minute. But the high, vibrating hum in my ear tells a different story. Julian is awake, his mind racing behind his closed lids, while he waits for the world to pity a hero. I lean over the bed, my breath cold against his temple, and I whisper his name like a curse in the dark. The monitor spikes to 85, a rhythmic proof of the fear that is beginning to rot his fake peace. I pull a silver needle from my tray, the liquid inside clear and deadly in the moonlight, filtering through the metal blinds. I tell him that Chloe Montgomery is currently being liquidated by Ivan and the Russian mob for her $10 million debt. His heart rate jumps to 100, the beep of the machine, becoming a frantic, metallic scream in the quiet hospital room. I press the tip of the needle against his IV line, the plastic yielding under the pressure of my cold. A steady hand, Julian's eyes fly open, his pupils blown wide, with the terror of a man whose lies have finally failed him. He tries to reach for the emergency call button, but I grab his wrist, pinning it to the bed with a strength born of rage. I tell him that if he makes a single sound, I will empty 5 milliliters of air into his vein tonight. The hum in my ear is absent, meaning he knows. I am no longer the woman who played his broken doll. Julian's breathing is shallow, a series of short, sharp gasps, as he stares at the needle and then at my eyes. I tell him I found the Project Phoenix folder, and I know exactly who cut the brake lines 5 years ago. His heart rate hits 120, a drum of panic that echoes against the sterile walls of his expensive prison. I ask him if the money was worth the blood of the only man who ever treated him like a son. Julian's jaw trembles, the sweat of a guilty soul breaking out on his forehead under the white gauze of his bandages. He tries to say he did it for us, but the high, piercing hum returns, a jagged vibration of a lie that cuts my skin. I pull out my phone, the screen glowing with a live, streaming feed to every major news outlet in the city of New York. I tell him that 100,000 people are watching his every move and waiting for the Saint of Manhattan to speak. Julian looks at the camera, his face a mask of horror, as he realizes his empire is built on a foundation of sand. I ask him again, my voice a low, lethal blade, about the night Thomas Vance died on the George Washington Bridge. He looks at the needle, then at the phone, and his heart rate begins to falter under the weight of the truth. He tells the world that my father was becoming a liability, a man who wanted to stop the expansion of Sterling Global. The hum in my ear is silent, a chilling clarity of a murderer finally admitting his crimes to the woman he betrayed. He says he paid the cleaner $500,000 to ensure the brakes failed at the highest point of the bridge. The confession pours out of him like a dark, toxic river, a flood of greed and blood that stains the hospital air. He admits to trashing the original will and hiring Dr. Bay, heiress, to drug me into a state of permanent, legal silence. The heart monitor is wailing now, a high, constant beep, as Julian's blood pressure spikes to a level that threatens his heart. He begs me to turn off the camera, promising me half of the $10 billion, if I only let him live. The hum returns, a frantic vibration of a man who is trying to buy his way out of hell one last time. I tell him that I do not want his money. I only want the legacy that he tried to steal from my blood. I show him the digital counter on the screen, revealing that Marcus Thorne has already secured the Vance tech servers from Brooklyn. Julian falls back against the pillows, his face a ghostly white, his unearned power evaporating in the cold light of the digital truth. He is no longer a CEO. He is a common criminal, whose confession is being recorded by the very people he tried to fool. The door handle rattles, a sharp, metallic sound of the guards trying to enter the room after hearing the monitor alarm. I stand up, my face a mask of cold satisfaction, as I watch Julian Sterling realize that his game is finally over. I tell him that he has 3 days until the deadline, and he will spend every second of it in a police precinct. The hum in my ear is a soft, fading echo, because the truth has finally silenced the lies that built this house. I unlock the door and step back, letting the officers rush in, as the confession of the century continues to play on the screen. Julian is shouting that I drugged him, but the needle is filled with nothing but sterile water, and a drop of his own fear. I walk out of the room, my head held high, as the weight of 5 years of silence finally lifts from my soul. I see Marcus Thorne at the end of the hall, holding a new set of keys, to the Vance Tech headquarters in Manhattan. We have 72 hours left. But the king of lies has already lost his crown to the daughter he underestimated. I step out of the Blacktown car in the heart of Brighton Beach, the neon sign of the Tsar Club flickering like a dying strobe light against the rusted iron of the elevated train tracks. The air smells of salt water, cheap tobacco, and the metallic tang of unspent violence that defines the Russian underworld of Brooklyn. Two bouncers with necks as thick as tree trunks stand outside the reinforced steel doors, their eyes scanning me with a hunger that has nothing to do with desire and everything to do with the $10 billion prize on my head. I do not look at them. I simply walk forward. The silk of my stolen nurse uniform, replaced by a sharp black blazer that conceals the micro-recorder in my wedding ring. One of them reaches for my shoulder. But I tell him that Ivan is expecting me, and that every second he delays me costs his boss $1 million in interest. The high, constant hum in my ear is absent, meaning the threat of financial loss is the only truth these animals understand in the dark. They step aside, the heavy doors groaning open to reveal a world of crimson velvet, pounding bass, and the smoke of 1,000 secrets. I move through the crowded club, the bass thumping against my ribs like the heartbeat of a giant, while my ears scan for the rhythmic deception of the men in the shadows. I reach the VIP lounge at the back, where Ivan sits behind a wall of bulletproof glass, surrounded by women who look like broken porcelain dolls. Chloe Montgomery is kneeling on the floor in the corner, her face a mask of purple bruises and the absolute, naked terror of a woman who has realized she is no longer the predator. Ivan looks at me, his eyes 2 chips of blue ice set in a face of scarred leather, and he tells me that Thomas Vance was a man of his word. My ear rumbles with a low, steady vibration, because Ivan is speaking a truth that shatters the image of the hero father I spent 5 years trying to avenge. He says my father did not just launder money. He traded my future to the mob to keep the Vance Tech servers running during the global crash. He tells me the debt is not $10 million. It is a life for a life. A blood oath that says the Vance bloodline belongs to the Tsar of Brooklyn. The heart monitor in my mind skips a beat as Ivan pulls out a yellowed piece of paper, the signature of Thomas Vance clear and undeniable under the dim red lights. He tells me that the $10 billion inheritance is already his, and that the Friday deadline is just a formality before he liquidates me and the Vance legacy. The high, piercing hum in my ear is silent. A chilling confirmation that my father made a deal with the devil to save his empire from a bankruptcy he could not face. Ivan laughs, a dry and rattling sound, and tells me that Chloe was the one who reminded him of the debt when Julian started to fail his payments. I look at Chloe, who is shaking so hard her teeth are chattering against the glass of her champagne flute, her eyes begging me for a mercy I do not have. Ivan reaches for a silver pistol on the table, telling me that he is going to finish what Julian Sterling started on the George Washington Bridge 5 years ago. I do not move. I do not blink. I simply pull out my tablet and show him the real-time cash flow of every shell company he owns in the Cayman Islands. I tell Ivan that Marcus Thorne has already initiated a hostile takeover of the bank that holds his $60 million in laundered assets. The hum in my ear is absent, because the cold, a hard logic of a digital bank run is the only language that can stop a bullet in Brighton Beach. I explain that Vance Tech is not just a software company. It is the spine of the global financial grid, and I have the keys to lock every door he ever opened. His heart rate spikes, a frantic drum of panic that I can hear through the glass, as he realizes the woman he thought was a victim is already holding his jugular. I tell him that if I die tonight, his $60 million will be donated to the FBI's Organized Crime Division in exactly 60 seconds. Ivan freezes, the silver pistol halfway to my chest, his mask of mob authority crumbling into a heap of desperate, calculating fear. He asks me what I want, his voice a low growl that sounds like a cornered beast, realizing the cage is already electrified and closing. I tell him that I want Chloe Montgomery handed over to the police, and I want a signed confession of her involvement in the Project Phoenix conspiracy. The hum in my ear is a soft, fading echo as Ivan realizes that his survival depends on betraying the woman who brought him the Vance debt. He looks at Chloe, then at the tablet, and then at the men in the shadows who are waiting for his signal to kill or to serve. He tells his guards to take Chloe to the precinct and to ensure she speaks every word of the truth before the sun rises over Manhattan. Chloe screams, a high and jagged sound of a woman who has finally fallen into the pit she dug for me. But the bass of the club swallows her voice. Ivan sets the pistol down, his hand trembling slightly, and he tells me that Thomas Vance would be proud of the monster he created in his daughter. The ringing in my ear is gone, replaced by the chilling silence of a victory that feels like a cold, heavy weight on my soul. I have the mob in my pocket. I have the confession in my hand, and I have less than 24 hours to claim the throne of New York. I walk out of the Czar Club, the morning air of Brighton Beach cold and sharp against my face, a stark contrast to the rot of the lounge. Marcus Thorne is waiting in the town car, his face a map of exhaustion and the grim satisfaction of a man who has seen the end of a long war. He tells me the police have already processed Julian's confession, and the news of Chloe's arrest is breaking on every screen in the city. The high hum in my ear is absent as he tells me that we have everything we need to sign the inheritance papers at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I look at the dark water of the Atlantic, knowing that I am no longer the woman who stood in the Met Gala with a wine-stained dress. I am Elena Vance, the woman who turned the Russian mob into her personal security and the Saint of New York into a common prisoner. We drive toward the Vance Tech headquarters, the skyline of Manhattan rising like a crown of glass and steel in the distance. The final deadline is coming, and I am the only one left standing on the chessboard of my father's lies. The boardroom of Vance Tech smells of sterile ozone, and the cold, lingering scent of my father's expensive tobacco. I walk toward the head of the table, my heels clicking against the polished obsidian floor, like the final seconds of a countdown that began 5 years ago. Marcus Thorne stands by the window, his silhouette dark against the sunrise of Manhattan, holding the golden pen that will transfer $10 billion to my name. I reach the chairman's seat, the leather cold and empty, and my eyes lock onto the black envelope resting on the armrest. My name is written in the sharp, architectural script of Thomas Vance, a handwriting I have memorized from 1,000 childhood letters and corporate memos. I pick it up, the paper heavy and textured, feeling a sudden, violent vibration in my ears that has nothing to do with Julian's lies. The room is silent, yet the hum in my head is a rhythmic, mechanical pulse that grows louder as my thumb breaks the wax seal of the Vance family crest. I pull out a single sheet of vellum, and the first line of the letter turns my blood into liquid nitrogen in my veins. My father did not just leave me a company. He left me a confession that redefines the very nature of my existence in this city of glass. Thomas Vance writes that the world is a sea of sharks, and he could not bear the thought of his daughter being torn apart by the lies of men like Julian Sterling. He explains that my gift, the high-pitched hum that unmasks deception, was never a biological miracle or a quirk of my genetic code. It was the result of the neural echo protocol, a microscopic biochip sessed into my auditory nerve, when I was only 6 years old during a routine surgery. The ringing in my ear is not a psychic intuition. It is a sophisticated algorithm that analyzes micro-expressions, heart rates, and vocal tremors in real time. My father turned me into a human lie detector, a perfect, technological weapon designed to survive a world that he knew would eventually try to consume me. He tells me that there is a kill switch, a sequence of numbers at the bottom of the page that will deactivate the chip and return me to a life of blissful, human ignorance. I look at the numbers, 5 digits that represent the difference between being a god of information or a woman who can finally hear the silence. The hum in my ear is deafening now, a scream of silicon and data that feels like it is trying to break through my skull and into the boardroom. Marcus Thorne turns from the window, his heart rate steady at 60 beats per minute, as he asks me if I am ready to sign the final protocol of the Vance inheritance. The hum in my ear is a soft, rhythmic purr, as I realize Marcus has known about the chip since the day my father initiated the project. Every word he spoke, every act of loyalty, was monitored and verified by the technology inside my head, making him the only man Thomas Vance truly trusted. I look at the golden pen, then at the black envelope, and I feel the weight of $10 billion pressing down on my soul like a tectonic plate. If I deactivate the chip, I will be vulnerable to the next Julian Sterling, the next Chloe Montgomery, and the next Ivan who walks through these doors. But if I keep it, I am no longer entirely human. I am a corporate entity, a living surveillance system that can never truly know the warmth of a sincere, unmonitored human connection. I hear the distant sound of the city waking up, a million voices and a billion lies, all waiting for the daughter of Thomas Vance to claim her throne. I realize my father did not give me a choice. He gave me a destiny, and the kill switch is just the final test of my resolve. I pick up the golden pen, the cold metal feeling like a scepter of absolute power, and I look at the board members who are beginning to file into the room. They are the men who doubted me, the men who laughed at Julian's jokes while he plotted my destruction, and the men who are now terrified of my silence. I do not type the kill switch code. Instead, I memorize it and then I tear the letter into 100 pieces, letting the vellum fall like white snow onto the obsidian floor. I sign the inheritance papers with a steady, lethal stroke, officially assuming control of the $10 billion Vance Tech empire and the Sterling global assets. The hum in my ear stabilizes into a crystal-clear frequency, a digital symphony of truth that allows me to hear the greed and the fear of every person in this building. I am not going to be the victim, and I am not going to be a normal woman. I am going to be the empress of the New World Order. I tell Marcus Thorne to initiate the liquidation of Sterling Global, and to ensure that Julian and Chloe are moved to the highest security prison in the state. The board members sit in silence, their eyes fixed on me. As I lean back in my father's chair and activate the internal server link, I address the board, my voice a low, authoritative blade that cuts through the tension of the room, informing them that the old rules of Vance Tech are officially dead. I explain that from this moment forward, every contract, every merger, and every internal communication will be subject to the final protocol of my personal verification. I see the heart rates of 3 directors spike in fear, their pulses visible in the veins of their necks, as they realize their secret offshore accounts are no longer hidden. I do not need to fire them. I simply need to let them know that I can see the rot inside their souls, and they will become my most loyal servants. Julian Sterling is a ghost in a cell, and Chloe Montgomery is a pawn of the mob. But I am the woman who owns the very air they breathe. I tell Marcus to prepare the announcement for Wall Street, stating that Elena Vance has not just returned, but she has evolved beyond the limitations of her predecessors. The sun is now fully above the horizon, the light reflecting off the glass towers of Manhattan, a city that finally belongs to the woman who can hear its every lie. The final protocol is not about the money. It is about the absolute clarity of power, and the ability to dictate reality to those who thought they could manipulate me. I feel the biochip hum with a new purpose, a perfect alignment of technology and my own cold, calculating will, as I survey the empire I have reclaimed from the ashes. I am the daughter of Thomas Vance, but I am the architect of a new legacy, one that will last long after the names of my enemies are forgotten. I stand up and walk toward the window, looking out over the grid of New York, a city built on the lies of men and the blood of the ambitious. I am no longer afraid of the high-pitched hum. I am no longer afraid of the dark secrets of Brighton Beach. And I am no longer the woman Julian Sterling thought he could break. I am Elena Vance, the CEO of Vance Tech, the owner of $10 billion, and the woman who knows exactly what you are thinking before you even speak. I smile, a thin and dangerous expression, as I realize that the game is not over. It has only just begun on my own terms. The world is a sea of sharks, and I have finally become the biggest predator of them all.